Hello, Linda.
Lovely to see you.
How are you getting on?
I'm really okay. I'm ashamed to say it. I think for the last few years I've been preparing for this isolation because I think if you are creative, it's been the ideal time just to do.
I discovered your work about a year ago now, and I'm absolutely fascinated with the different techniques and processes that you use to create it. For people who've not come across your work before, how would you describe it?
I describe my work as not coming from the traditional textile courses, because that's not the route that I came through. I came through a route of a degree in sculptural ceramics and a master's degree in electronic art, but I've always really liked textiles. And I feel that I'm a bit of an amateur, really. So the pros and cons of that are that there's no holds barred for me. I will just go at something, and this sort of almost childlike, oh, I'll just try that out. And somebody will say to me, do you know such and such a stitch? Well, actually, I don't. I just get led by the feel of the cloth, a particular technique, and I'll just go with that. It's more about trying to get something that will be able to express a theme that I'm working to. So I wouldn't say that it was intuitive, but it is probably led by some sort of emotional reaction to looking at a piece of cloth, looking at colours of things, and liking working with material, fabric. I like it. It's much more manageable than, say, working with something like ceramics, which could blow up in the kiln. It's within a certain control which I like.
Are there any particular themes or subject matters that you're drawn to when you're creating your work?
The impetus for a lot of the work is about society and how we as human beings interact. You'll probably note within my work that I use a lot of text, and it's not because I set out to use text, it's just that it actually comes in to the designing as I work through it. I think, oh yes. Now this is quite odd really, because I am dyslexic, and so I love the beauty of text. I want it woven into the work, but then sometimes I go through this sort of dark night of the soul thinking, I've put this on, but is it spelt right? And I think, oh no, have I made a terrible faux pas? And should I keep it like that if it's so? But it is important to me, and it's to further emphasize what the message is. I really like incorporating the imagery that I've cobbled together on Photoshop, work that I've done in dark rooms as well, which I can show you my present piece of work that I'm working on at the moment, which is about under the headline of COVID-19. And the stance that I'm taking with that is not so much masks or people being good. In fact, it's people being quite naughty, really. So I would start with maybe just a sort of a sketch, then starting to do sample pieces. So this is my own photogram work. So it's basically cameraless photography. And so I was looking at test tubes, and some of the cures for COVID were blowing feathers up your nose. And also here, I was looking for something that looked like wires, and in the sort of the 5G and tearing down 5G infrastructure. And so then I would take it on to Photoshop and doing sample pieces, maybe using a thing called tap paper, which is a transferring paper from your printer onto material. And then finally, I would have the work printed out, and then I'd start to embellish. I'm just using what appears to be lush to me and getting a message over. So sometimes looking at my work, it does look like sort of like a lush pattern, or there's beautiful sort of velvets being used. But then if you actually look into the message of the piece of work, it's not always as benign as what the piece would actually give you to believe when you first look at it. So in many ways, I'm just giving you a puzzle to work through as the viewer, and then for you to make your mind up on that. So Pepsi Cola Man is about waste, and it's called waste embellishment. 4 years ago, I approached a waste recycling unit. They thought I was slightly unusual, wanting to stay with the staff for a full week. But there I took lots and lots of photos, and I had the most splendid of times. But part of that was walking past a skip and seeing in this skip a Pepsi Cola tin with this crushed can in it. And now I know that crushed cans have been used many a time, but it was the footballer's image that had been printed on the outside of the can, had been squashed, and he looked perplexed to have fallen from some great height of being a Premier League footballer to ending up in a skip. And it was sort of the look of sort of get me out of here. But within that series, I've also had solar bodies, and that was something joyous too, because within the unit they had these great vats where people poured food oil. And so I stuck my head, believe it or not, through one of these to these vats, and I saw a whole universe of congealed fat, and the sides of this vat were the most acid yellow. And I just thought, wow. I got this home and I sort of played around with it on Photoshop, and it just looked like an astral body, these 3 images that I came up with. And I printed that on a very deep piled velvet, and that the latest showing of that was at the Ferrans Gallery in Hull, and they were kind enough to have this triptych, this huge triptych. And I stood by and I was asking people, I was saying, what do you think it is? And they said, oh, it's planetary system and what have you. And I said, well, please look closer. And so they went in and they had a look, and they said, is that a cigarette dumped in there? And I said, yes, it's a cigarette dumped in cooking fat. You're actually looking at vats of cooking fat. They look like astral bodies. And so a lot of the work in this waste embellishment is taking sort of terrible images of waste and embellishing it. And there's quite a lot in that series, Katie. But that's where your Pepsi Cola Man comes from. He's been embellished, lovingly embellished, but still trapped in a Pepsi Cola can.
So are there any tips or techniques that you could share with some of the viewers, please?
I think that the greatest tip that I could give anyone who's embarking on doing creative work is to get down and do it and prioritize it, and that it is important for you to do your work, and that you must remember that when you're dead and gone, nobody will remember you for how well you ironed tablecloths or tea cloths or socks. You have to leave them something beyond the immediate. You have to do something which says that you're here. And I think that all artwork, whether it be art, music, poetry, is a statement by the maker, by the creative, to say, I'm here. And so that my tip to you is make a statement about being here. Stop doing the ironing. Stop ironing tea cloths, tablecloths, and do some artwork. That's my tip to you. And also, it's quite normal and natural to doubt yourself, and doubt yourself at regular times through doing a piece of work, but just plow through it.
Thank you very much for your time today, Linda. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Well, Katie, I would have to say likewise, and I have looked previously at all the other videos that you've done, and I think it's an excellent way of presenting work at this present time and allowing that out to a wider audience. I'm really impressed with it, and so consequently, if I'm impressed with it, I'm also very honoured to be included in it. So thank you very much indeed.